Trade talks between the US and Canada just fell apart overnight. South Korea fired warning shots at North Korean soldiers near the border, and a Christian metal band is suing Netflix over its hit movie K-pop Demon Hunters. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, it's me, Corey Teacher, your personal English teacher here on YouTube. And this is Digestible News, your news in digestible English, where we'll teach intermediate English with news stories from Korea and around the world. Quick note before we start, the next 3 stories are called the blank section. There's no vocabulary help or sentence explanation yet. Just listen or read and try to catch as much as you can using context. You can find the newspaper version, the PDF of this story in the comments down below. We'll go back through everything together with explanations after the 3 stories are finished. But let's get started with our first story. The US and Canadian trade war escalates. We'll talk about escalates later. Here we go. Trade talks between the United States and Canada collapsed late Friday night, and just hours later, the US hit Canada with steep new tariffs. The 50% tariffs went into effect at midnight, targeting a wide range of Canadian goods, including hockey sticks, building materials, liquor, and certain kinds of clothing. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the move a miscalculation and blamed the breakdown on what he described as unfair demands from the Trump administration. He said Canada would hit back with matching tariffs of its own, dollar for dollar. The collapse came as a surprise to many since just days earlier on Tuesday, Trump had paused the tariffs for 72 hours, posting online that the 2 countries have a deal. Officials on both sides had seemed optimistic right up until the final hours of negotiation. On Thursday, Canada's trade minister met for several hours with the U.S. trade representative, and both sides appeared close to an agreement. One sticking point that reportedly caused things to fall apart was a request from Carney asking Canadian provinces to lift their bans on American alcohol sales. Quebec's premier said as late as Thursday that she was still reviewing the request, and it's unclear whether an agreement on that issue was ever reached before talks broke down entirely. That's our first story. If you're enjoying this so far, why not give it a like and subscribe? We're going to go into more detail later, and I hope it helps you on your English language learning journey. Also, you can leave a comment down below. I like to read them. Now let's move on to our next story. South Korea firing warning shots as North Korean troops cross the DMZ border. South Korea's military fired warning shots this week after North Korean soldiers crossed the military demarcation line, the first such incident of the year. The crossing happened in the eastern section of the demilitarized zone. According to South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff, the soldiers stepped across the line before returning to North Korean territory after the warning shots were fired. This marks a shift from earlier in the year when no crossings had been reported at all, a contrast to the 17 recorded crossings in 2025. The incident comes amid a much bigger pattern. North Korea has sharply increased its border construction efforts this year, mobilizing around 5,000 personnel for the work in just the first half of 2026, compared to only about 1,000 during the same period last year. South Korean officials say North Korea has installed barbed wire fences as close as 80 to 90 meters from the demarcation line and cleared land for mines within 5 to 10 meters of it in some areas. South Korea's Ministry of National Defense says this construction violates the 1953 Armistice Agreement, which established the DMZ as a buffer zone between the two countries. At the current pace, officials estimate North Korea could complete its full fortification effort within 2 to 3 years, faster than an earlier estimate of more than 4 years. Interestingly, the incident came shortly after South Korean President Lee Jae-myung proposed renewed talks with North Korea during his Liberation Day address, showing how diplomacy and military tension continue side by side along the border. As a little side note, but as well as a few extra missiles were fired even after the drills were shortened, right? All right, let's move on to our third story. A Christian metal band sues Netflix over K-pop Demon Hunter's name. A very interesting story I found here for you. Let's get started. A Christian metal band called Demon Hunter is suing Netflix, claiming the streaming giant's hit animated movie, K-pop Demon Hunters, has caused serious confusion with their own decades-old name. The band, formed in Seattle back in 2000, took legal action through its corporate entity, Hyde Lane, in a federal court in California. The lawsuit accuses Netflix, or specifically Netflix Studios, and concert promoter AEG Presents of trademark infringement, false designation of origin, and unfair competition. Difficult sentence. Demon Hunter holds a federal trademark for live musical performances registered back in 2014, and the band argues it built its identity and fan base over 25 years, long before Netflix's movie existed, or before Netflix for that matter. The lawsuit lays out some pretty striking examples of real confusion. In one case, a parent emailed asking for a refund after spending $500 on concert tickets, only to realize they'd accidentally bought tickets to a Demon Hunter metal show rather than anything connected to the fictional animated girl group. In another, a journalist from a major entertainment show reached out asking to interview the film's fictional songwriter, believing they'd won an Oscar. Tensions escalated further after Netflix and AEG announced a K-pop Demon Hunters world tour spanning 150 cities, set to begin in 2027. The band argues this pushes Netflix's brand directly into the same live touring space the band has occupied for decades, making the overlap and confusion even worse. Netflix has pushed back firmly, calling the allegations without merit, this is in quotes, and defending the film as an Academy Award-winning global phenomenon. The band is seeking a jury trial, financial damages, and a court order preventing Netflix from using the name going forward. All right, that's the end of our 3 stories. From here, we're going to switch to our explanation section. You can go back now and listen to the stories one more time to see how much you understand, or to check the pronunciation or just listening practice. Or you can move on with me into the explanation section, where I will go sentence by sentence and explain what I meant when I wrote what I wrote. Okay? Yeah, sounds good? All right, let's go through the explanation section now. And then at the end, go back and re-listen again. See if it sounds better. See if you can understand it better. All right, here we go. Story 1. U.S.-Canada trade war escalates. First, escalate is like escalator, where it's going up. In the same way, the trade war is becoming more intense. Trade talks between the United States and Canada fell apart. To fall apart means for a plan or agreement to fail, to break. Late Friday night, and just hours later, the U.S. hit Canada with steep new tariffs. Simply, U.S. and Canada were talking about trade, and then it broke apart. So America made taxes, big taxes, for Canada. The 50% tariffs went into effect at midnight, targeting a wide range of Canadian goods, including hockey sticks, building materials, liquor, and certain kinds of clothing. So yes, you heard it right, 50% tax on imports started at midnight. And it was for hockey things, building things, some alcohol, and some clothes. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called the move a miscalculation and blamed the breakdown on what he described as unfair demands from the Trump administration. The miscalculation is in quotes because it is a direct quote from him. He called it a mistake and said the talks failed, and then the retaliation, the actions by the Trump administration were unfair, not good. He said Canada would hit back. Hit back means to respond to an attack with a counter attack. So America punches, we punch too, with matching tariffs of its own, dollar for dollar. He said Canada will tax America the same amount, exactly the same. The collapse came as a surprise to many, since just days earlier on Tuesday, Trump had paused the tariffs for 72 hours, posting online that the two countries have a deal. The quotes, again, direct quote from Trump. Simply, everyone was surprised. A few days ago, Trump stopped the tariff for 3 days. He said that Canada and the U.S. made an agreement. Officials on both sides had seemed optimistic right up until the final hours of the negotiation. So both sides seemed very positive, hopeful, up until the very end. On Thursday, Canada's trade minister met for several hours with the U.S. trade representative, and both sides appeared close to an agreement. On Thursday, the trade leader talked to trade representative in America and talked for hours. It seemed very positive. It seemed like they had a deal. It looked like there was a deal. One sticking point that reportedly caused things to fall apart was a request from Carney asking Canadian provinces to lift their bans on American alcohol sales. One issue, one problem that caused the breakdown, the fail, was the Canadian Prime Minister asked the Canadian regions to remove a ban on selling American alcohol. Quebec's premier said as late as Thursday that she was still reviewing the request, and it's unclear whether an agreement on that issue was ever reached before talks broke down entirely. On Thursday, Quebec's leader said she was thinking about the request, what the prime minister asked. And it was not clear if she decided or didn't decide before the talks broke apart, before the deal broke apart. Okay? Understand? All right. Whew. Good. Need a little coffee break after that one. These days I'm getting mega coffee, the mega, how do you say it? The Megacano, that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really a coffee drinker at the late part of summer. Earlier in the summer, I kind of slowed it down, but these days, lots of ice Americano, right? Yeah. How about you guys? The weather's been quite nice. I know I always talk about the weather, but it's something we all experience. And yeah, I'm actually quite happy with it. Though the random rain has caught me off guard a few times. I didn't have an umbrella with me and had to get a little wet, but that's all right. It happens sometimes. Just enjoy it, right? Not every day you get to walk in the rain. Anyway, ready to move to the second story? All right, let's do that now. 1 second. Okay, pause there. Let me fix it. And here we go. Ready? All right, let's move on to our second story. South Korea firing warning shots as North Korean troops cross the DMZ. South Korea's military fired warning shots this week after North Korean soldiers crossed the line. Cross the line means to go past a boundary. That's not just literally, but figuratively too. For example, if someone says something inappropriate, not good, that's crossing a line, right? If someone touches your body on your shoulder or something, that's kind of crossing a line. Only certain people can do that, right? In this case, North Korea crossed a real line, the demarcation line, the DMZ. But it can also be figurative, like a metaphor, right? Okay. They crossed the line, separating the two countries. This is the first such incident of the year. First time this year that this has happened. So South Korea fired warning shots. Warning shots are shots that have no target. The target is not a person. It's just to tell the other person, hey, be careful. So they shot at North Korean soldiers because North Korean soldiers crossed the border. This year, in 2026, this is the first time it's happened. The crossing happened in the eastern section of the demilitarized zone. So it happened on the east part, off to the right side of the map. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the soldiers stepped across the line before returning to North Korean territory after the warning shots were fired. So South Korea's military says the soldiers stepped across, then went back to North Korea after South Korea shot warning shot. Make sense? This marks a shift from earlier in the year when no crossings had been reported at all, a contrast to the 17 recorded crossings in 2025. So simply, last year there was 17 crossings that we know about. But this year, until this weekend, there have been 0. So it's very different. In contrast, it means comparing. The incident comes amid a much bigger pattern. So this is part of a bigger pattern, a bigger trend. North Korea has stepped up. Step up means to increase the level or intensity of something. So stepping up your uploads on YouTube means you're increasing the number. Stepping up my diet means to make my diet more intense. Step up my study program means to increase the intensity, to increase the amount of studying. Okay? Step up is a pretty good phrase. You should remember this one. It's pretty useful. Okay. They've stepped up their border construction efforts this year, mobilizing around 5,000 personnel for the work in just the first half of 2026, compared to only about 1,000 during the same period last year. So North Korea stepped up or increased border construction in 2026. They used 5,000 workers in 6 months. Last year, at the same time, last August, they only used 1,000. South Korean officials say North Korea has installed barbed wire fences as close as 80 to 90 meters from the demarcation line and cleared landmines within 5 to 10 meters of it in some areas. South Korea says North Korea built fences as close as 80 to 90 meters from the border. And they made the land free of trees and grass and everything, made it clear to put mines within just 5 or 10 meters of the line. South Korea's Ministry of National Defense says this construction violates the 1953 Armistice Agreement, which established the DMZ as a buffer zone between the two countries. South Korea's defense ministry, says the wall and the mines breaks the 1953 agreement, the deal between the two countries. At the current pace, officials estimate North Korea could complete its full fortification effort within 2 to 3 years, faster than an earlier estimate of more than 4 years. So now, with the new speed, the new stepping up, they think North Korea can finish the whole project in just 2 years, maybe 3. Before, they thought it will be 4 years, but now maybe 2. Interestingly, the incident came shortly after South Korean President Lee Jae-myung proposed renewed talks with North Korea during his Liberation Day address, showing how diplomacy and military tension continue side by side along the border. So interestingly, this happened after South Korea's president, our president here, said, let's start talking again to North Korea. Despite the peaceful effort, there is some more military effort. Make sense? Yeah, it's always a little tense about North and South Korea, but yeah, it's always been that way. All right, well, let's move on to our next story. Please excuse me while I touch the mic. I know there's a small sound when I touch it. I try really hard not to touch the mic, but sometimes it's unavoidable, not avoidable. All right. The next story is about K-pop demon hunters and the Christian metal band. A Christian metal band called Demon Hunter is taking legal action. To take legal action means to sue or to start a court case against someone or some group. In this case, they're doing it against Netflix, claiming the streaming giant's hit animated movie K-pop Demon Hunters has caused confusion with their own decades-old name. So they're a Christian metal group, metal music. Their name is Demon Hunter. They are suing Netflix, opening a legal case, taking legal action. They say K-pop Demon Hunters is confusing people with their own name, and their name is decades old, like 20, 30 years old. The band, formed in Seattle back in 2000, filed the lawsuit through its corporate entity Hyde Lane in a federal court in California. So the band, which was started in Seattle in the year 2000, that band made a lawsuit, took legal action through the company Hyde Lane, which is their big company, their owning company, in a federal court in California. The lawsuit accuses Netflix and Netflix Studios and concert promoter AEG Presents of trademark infringement, false designation of origin, and unfair competition. So the lawsuit says Netflix and a concert company called AEG Presents illegally used their trademark and is causing unfair competition. Demon Hunter holds a federal trademark for live action performances registered back in 2014. And the band argues it built its identity and fan base over 25 years, long before Netflix's movie existed. So Demon Hunter says, we own the trademark for live music. And we got that in 2014. And we built our fans over 25 years. This is before you made your movie. The lawsuit lays out some pretty striking examples of real confusion. So the lawsuit gives some surprising, confusing situations. In one case, a parent emailed the Demon Hunter band asking for a refund after they spent $500 on concert tickets. They spent only to realize they'd accidentally bought tickets to a Demon Hunter metal show rather than anything connected to the fictional animated girl group. Simply, in one case, there was a parent. She bought $500 of tickets. Then she emailed them asking for a refund, saying, I didn't know you were not K-pop Demon Hunters. I thought you were Huntrix. In another, a journalist from a major entertainment show reached out asking to interview the film's fictional songwriter, believing they'd won an Oscar. So, a news person from a big entertainment show contacted Demon Hunter, the band, and asked, hey, can we interview your songwriter because you won an Oscar? And they said, we are a Christian metal band. We are not K-pop Demon Hunters. Tensions escalated. Remember, escalate. Further, after Netflix and AEG announced a K-pop Demon Hunters world tour spanning 150 cities set to begin in 2027. Things got more tense. They trended bad after Netflix and AEG announced or suddenly said a world tour across 150 cities was starting in 2027. The band argues this pushes Netflix's brand directly into the same live touring space the band has occupied for decades, making the overlap and confusion even worse. Simply, the band says Netflix is now acting inside of their area, inside of their trademark. Netflix has pushed back. Push back means to resist or to disagree really firmly, really strongly, to push back. So I disagree firmly means I push back, right? Calling the allegations without merit, again, direct quote, and defending the film as an Academy Award-winning phenomenon. So Netflix strongly disagrees. They say there's no basis, and we're a worldwide hit. The band is seeking a jury trial, financial damages, and a court order, preventing Netflix from using the name going forward. So the band wants the jury, so normal people, to be in the court case, money for damage, and they want the court to force Netflix to not use Demon Hunter as a name in the future. Wild, right? Oh. All right, let's do our This Week in History and then have a little chat. This week in history, in 1963, hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the American Capitol for one of the most significant civil rights demonstrations in history. I know you know what I'm talking about. On August 28th, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom drew an estimated 250,000 people to the National Mall, calling for an end to racial segregation and discrimination, along with better job opportunities and equal pay for Black Americans. It was there the civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, calling for a future where people would be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. The march is widely credited with helping build momentum for the Civil Rights Act, which passed the following year and outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national identity or national origin. Today, the speech remains one of the most recognized as pieces of oratory, or speaking, in American history and world history for that matter. And the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where King delivered it, draw visitors from around the world who come to stand in that same spot. Yeah, that's a very big moment in American history. Of course, I'm sure you've heard about it many times. All right. So the big question I have for you today to think about, and you can write an answer if you'd like, or with a pencil, put in the comments, whatever it may be. Which of these three stories do you think will see major changes, positive or negative, in the coming weeks? Or how do you think each of these stories will change in the coming weeks? Because I think each of them will have different kinds of change, but I'm more interested in your answer and how you answer. Try to use the phrases that we lined up. Hold on. Try to use the phrases we learned today, some of the expressions. Practice using them, making sentences with me in the comments. I'll be happy to read them and help you if there's some error, and we can improve together. Sound good? All right. This has been Digestible News, and I've been Corey, your personal English teacher here on YouTube. If you like this video, please leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Over half of those watching are still not subscribed, so why not just join us? If you'd like, you can also join the channel. There's a join button down below, but no pressure. There will be members-only content there. I'm doing a segment called Special Edition, which is a more in-depth version of a single story with the PDF, and I go line by line and word by word and explain everything. You can find that and previous ones if you go to the members page. There will also be extended versions of interviews and extended versions of other types of outside content that's not news related in there as well. You get some other benefits as well. Just go check it out if you want. No pressure though. Yeah, anyway, hope you've had a great week, and I hope you continue to have a great week. Remember to always improve yourself every day, every chance you get, just a little bit. And always applaud yourself for that little bit of positive change you make in the world. Okay? All right. Remember, try to stay informed, but above all, remember to stay curious. Bye for now.